The Boston Celtics are NBA champions for the 18th time, and this is the Just Basketball Show. Before we get to a recap of everything that went down on Monday night as the Celtics raised their banner at home, Wes, Finals MVP, Jaylen Brown, called it before the series, going to take my victory lap now, get that out of the way. Did the voters get it right? Is that the right selection for the 2024 Finals MVP?
They got it right. Jayson Tatum made a great late push, 31 points on 11 of 24 shooting, 11 assists, and 8 rebounds in the Game 5. But that was easily and by far his most impactful, best game of this series. Jaylen Brown, not as efficient as Tatum tonight, but I think for the series overall, much more impactful. Not just offensively, where he's overall been way more efficient than Jayson Tatum, but I thought defensively, a lot more impactful and big minutes on that end than even Tatum was. Not that Tatum was bad, but Jaylen Brown picking up full court, Luka Doncic all series long, really I thought threw him out of rhythm, especially in this Game 5 too, by the way. I thought it was one of Jaylen Brown's better defensive games in this series among many. So I would not be surprised. We're recording this. We don't have what the vote got split. It's usually 9 voters. If this was 5-4 Jaylen Brown, it wouldn't shock me. I think it was close. I wouldn't have been upset if it went to Jayson Tatum. Again, what a great statement in the most important game of the series for him. But I do think they got it right in giving to Jaylen Brown. What about you?
I love it. I think it's kind of the 2015 Andre Iguodala Finals MVP combined with the typical guy who scores a lot. It's a little bit of
fair enough.
You defended the best player. If he had just done that, I think Tatum still gets it. He goes for 21, 5, and 5 averages in the series as well. So, yeah, here we are. Brown winning Eastern Conference Finals MVP, NBA Finals MVP, the debate over which of these guys is better. It's just the gift that keeps giving. Like, the season's
Brown's
over,
got the hardware.
but
Jayson Tatum's got the overall career stats and importance to the team and on balance in the MVP voting.
There it is.
So, yeah, just another summer of debate for Boston. Good for you guys.
Exactly. That gave Boston Sports Radio like all of July and August of content now. Right. They don't have to worry about anything. Yeah, crazy that Jaylen Brown is not on an All-NBA team this year and yet got those 2 awards. Just a very bizarre thing, but I think it speaks to kind of how this whole pathway played out for them and why it's so fascinating. So we'll dive into the 106-88 victory by Boston, as well as their championship run and what it means for both teams here coming out of the series on today's Just Basketball Show. Welcome into the Just Basketball Show. It is Tuesday, June 18th. I'm Brendon Kleen. That over there is Wes Goldberg. This is your 3 times a week dose of all things hoops here on the Just Basketball Show. So follow, rate, and review wherever you're finding us. We're free and available everywhere, including YouTube. Follow us on social media as well, TikTok, Instagram, and X. Content on the daily across all of those platforms. Support for today's episode of the Just Basketball Show comes from BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, do it right now. Use the bonus code JustBasketball and get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager at BetMGM. Here's how it works. Step 1, download the BetMGM Sportsbook app on iOS or Android and sign up using the code JustBasketball. Step 2, deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. Step 3, receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if that bet loses. Just make sure to use the bonus code JustBasketball when you sign up. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 or older to wager. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Wes. The Boston Celtics are the 2024 NBA champions. They win Game 5 on their home court, 106-88. We'll break down all the big picture ramifications of this for the Celtics, for the Mavs, and everything that got them here and what comes next and all of that. But let's focus on this game first. Why did Boston answer after an ugly Game 4 and ultimately dominate and win this game?
Came down to 3 things for me. It was a 3-point shooting. Boston, 13 of 39 from 3-point range, but even a little bit more efficient in the meaningful parts of this game before it went to garbage time, basically for the second half of the fourth quarter. Dallas, 11 for 37 from 3-point range, but honestly, it was worse than that for most of this game before the meaningless moments of this game. So that was a big part of it. Not necessarily surprising. That's been a big part of the whole series. A little bit more surprising was the offensive rebounding advantage that Boston had in this game. 15 offensive rebounds, 4 of them by Derek White and 4 of them by Drew Holiday. Those offensive rebounds by the guards are killer, just total emotion crushers. And I thought that things like that kind of drained the Mavericks of whatever giddy up they had after that surprising Game 4 win, that big Game 4 win that they had. So I thought the offensive rebounds were huge, not just from an emotional standpoint, but also just the second chance points were huge for Boston in this game. And then obviously the defense. The defense was smothering in the second half where this game really got away from the Mavericks. The Mavericks missed 11 straight shots, and the game was just over basically after that. Some of it was obviously self-inflicted by Dallas. You don't miss 11 shots just because your defense is great. But overall, Boston's defense was awesome, just like it has been for most of this series. And to me, those are the 3 things that kind of stood out to me from this game.
The main takeaways that I have are honestly just in line with what I felt about the series. So I almost want to sit here for one more second. The rotation continues to be, it's over now. It doesn't really matter looking forward, but we talked about the Exum minutes being pretty solid, Chris and I on Friday.
Yep.
He barely plays tonight. I thought Kleba looked a little better. I didn't fully trust that. Obviously, the Josh Green side of things works really well, and they're able to attack Porzingis. It just feels crazy that 5 games into a final series and 100 games into a season, Jason Kidd still felt like he was searching, and I guess that's just what happens when you're the losing side of this type of thing, but it felt like he wasn't even sticking with what was working game to game.
Yeah, I mean, what was it, Game 3 where he played 11 guys? And then Game 4, he was a little bit more balanced, but that was such a weird game, I barely even count it. And then you're right, in Game 5, I think everybody agreed that Exum was probably the right move in this game. They didn't go in that direction. I thought Maxi Kleber's minutes were terrible. I thought one of the biggest kind of missed steps in this entire game was Luka Doncic drives to the left side of the rim, puts it up. Kleber gets it on the right side of the rim, offensive putback, and just doesn't even look at the basket. It was total Ben Simmons-like. Yeah. Doesn't even look at the rim, and you see Luka pointing up at the basket, like put it up, and Kleber just dribbles it out and resets the thing, and it ends up with a contested P.J. Washington shot in the corner, which of course he missed because he's been missing all of those all series. But and he went 0 for 5 tonight. So I understand the issues with the rotation on Dallas's side. I still don't think that playing Exum another 6 minutes per game dramatically changes this series in any meaningful way.
I mean, you and I have covered playoff series. When it gets to this point and you're talking about Exum, the series is over, right? I mean, that's what it is. Yeah.
Right. If Exum is at the top of your list, then you've got a lot of problems that you're kind of ignoring here. But Derek Jones Jr., I thought he played a really good game for the first half, then kind of disappeared in the second half. I know he got hurt a little bit there or whatever. P.J. Washington was a no-show the entire series. It was too inconsistent for Daniel Gafford, too inconsistent for Derek Lively, and really outside of Luka Doncic, the Mavericks got no consistent performances from anybody the entire game. Even Kyrie Irving was 5 for 16 tonight, and I look at that box score and I'm like, wow, he made 5 shots? Because it felt worse than that to me. So, and then obviously in this one, Luka looked injured / tired / all of the above. It wasn't the defensive sort of like, he wasn't the defensive problem that he was in Game 3. He wasn't as good as he was in Game 4. But offensively, it just didn't look like he had it. Again, Jaylen Brown's full court pressure, I thought, really took him out of rhythm. And they just looked kind of done after the first half. I mean, Peyton Pritchard hits that heave going into halftime, and you're just like, this is just not going to be Dallas's night, is it?
Well, it speaks to it, right? Pritchard played just that 1 minute, makes that shot. He's like a specialist now. He just goes out there for half-court shots.
Right.
But Boston played 7 guys. And they were theoretically the thinner team. That's been one of their weaknesses. It just didn't even matter because their top 5, top 6 is so good. Porzingis, I think, testament to him for getting out there. It was cool that he got to contribute in the closeout game. That's probably going to feel really good for him for the rest of his life. He didn't even have to play. If he hadn't played, this game would have gone the same way. So, yeah, I mean, I think on Dallas's side, part of their issue is they're running into a situation where their only other options and answers that they could potentially throw out there are all small guys. And you could tell they were trying to search for size and physicality and everything to match the Celtics. They just didn't have it. They're rostered. I mean, Markieff Morris, you're going to put him out there? They didn't have They didn't have that solution. So that kind of brings me to the takeaways, and we can get into more of a series scope, I think, here, because it was
can we talk about the Porzingis part of it? I don't know if that's what you were getting to, but I think
go
it's
for
important.
it. Yeah, it's one and the same, but this game was his first back, so let's do it.
So he checks in with 6 minutes and 49 seconds left in the first quarter. Celtics are up 11-5. Earlier than I thought he was going to check in. I was a little surprised to see him that early. But, hey, they rolled him out there. And in hindsight, it was the right move by Joe Mazzulla. If he does screw it up and if Porzingis doesn't have that oomph in him, if he doesn't have what it takes, then there's still enough time left in the game to kind of make up for any problems. And Porzingis checks in. Kyrie Irving on the very first play, tests KP on the first possession, left side, pick and roll, gets a wide open three-pointer out of it. He misses. The next two but it was a wide open three. It's exactly what you want. The next two plays, Luka tests Kristaps Porzingis in the pick and roll. They get two wide open three-pointers for Josh Green above the break. Porzingis was hanging back, and he looked pretty good. They were doing a lot of pre-switching, obviously trying to keep Porzingis in the paint, prevent him from having to come out. But the Mavericks smartly identified the mismatch, knew where the open shot was going to be, and forced Porzingis to try to close out, which he just couldn't do. And they end up coming back in this game. And I'm like, oh, maybe we got something here. But Boston stuck with it, man. Like, this is the one thing about the Celtics, and this sort of is a zoomed-out takeaway, is no matter what kind of runs the Dallas Mavericks have made, they knew what their strategy was. They believed in the viability of that strategy long-term over the course of a 48-minute contest. And they said, we don't care about your run because we're going to go on our own runs, and we're willing to live with this. And then what happened? Boston went on a 9-0 run, went up 28-18. They caused 2 or 3 steals during that run, all transition defense stuff, basically keeping Kristaps Porzingis out of the defense. Said, we're just going to take the ball from you by the time you get by half court, so you don't even get a chance to test Kristaps Porzingis anymore. I thought it was really smart. And then Dallas, where I thought Boston has done such a good job sticking with what has worked and leaning into that throughout this series, I didn't see Dallas really go back to attacking Porzingis for the rest of the game in a meaningful way. They kind of got out of it after that initial haymaker or counterpunch, I should say, from the Celtics, and the game just got away from them.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the reason this is why it's kind of cool with Boston. It's almost impossible to just evaluate takeaways from this game that aren't takeaways about who they are as a team, right? And I think
exactly
part of what is interesting as we've watched now this whole postseason, and of course, there will probably still be arguments this whole rest of this week about if they were truly tested, and I don't even really care. I guess just to me, whether it was Cleveland or Indiana or who did they play in the first round? Miami.
I don't remember either.
Yeah,
exactly. I thought you were joking.
No, I really wasn't. I had to place it for a minute. And then this series,
I was like, cool Monday night dig, Brendon. Very nice.
You could dig me plenty. We're avoiding the offseason for now, but your team won one more game than mine did this playoff, so I can't say much.
Fair enough.
This whole idea of Boston coming back or letting it slip and having to make their run, that feels like a feature, not a bug of this team. It's not like they want to go down a bunch of points, but we also saw games where they threw the first punch and then maybe the other team came back. They always had the final push. They always had the final run in them, whether it was the last couple minutes when they needed to get their shit together because they were taking bad shots and then they had to kind of stabilize, or it was a quarter, or it was this end of quarter here. They always have that. And I think part of it is we look so much at the offense and the whole math side of things, and Mazzulla talking and making Boston media crazy using that word and the way it triggers certain media types and everything else. But their defensive math, to me, and their trust in the shots they're forcing their opponent to take, I think gets really, really lost. And I think that stretch was really big because when Porzingis came into the game, it was 10-5 Boston. When the first timeout was called by the Celtics after he checked in, it was 16-13 Boston. So the Mavs won those minutes, 8-6. Far cry from game one when Porzingis basically won the game in the first quarter. But then it goes to the stretch you're talking about where Boston throws their next punch. And what they did is they said, okay, Josh Green on the pick and pop, he made 2 in a row. That's what forced the Celtics timeout right there. Whatever. Josh Green's not going to beat us with above-the-break threes on pick and pop as a screener. That's not going to happen. So we're not going to panic. We're not going to adjust our lineup. We're going to leave Porzingis in the game. We're going to keep playing the way we want to play. and we'll be fine. And they were fine literally the minute that they came back onto the court from that timeout. I just feel like that stretch, I know the game went back and forth a few different ways after that, but honestly, that was kind of it to me.
Yeah, I mean, how many haymakers have the Celtics landed on the Mavericks this entire series in the first half? It just felt basically over in, I don't know, are 3 of the 5 games. You had the one game that it felt like it was going to go that way, and then they came back late from a 21-point deficit, and then Luka fouls out with 3 minutes left in the game, and then obviously the Game 4 reverse blowout thing there. But the Celtics were clearly the better team the entire series. We can kind of zoom out now. We could do we do the conversation now in terms of whether or not they're a deserving champion and kind of debate the path here? Because I was pretty critical of the Celtics. Not that I didn't feel like they deserved to be in the finals, but that I didn't chalk me up as one of the non-believers, man. Like I wanted to see something more than what I had seen, and I'm
not a Miami resident being a Celtics hater. This can't be.
Who knew? But it's not that I'm anti-stats. It's just I'm not only stats, right?
Yeah.
And so I heard all the net rating stuff and the best net rating since these Warriors and those Bulls and all that stuff. And I'm like, I don't know. They just don't have that top thing that makes me – I don't fear them the way that I feared a Steph Curry, 3-point blizzard, or the way that people fear Michael Jordan. There's no fear here. And that to me was the missing factor. So it's a little bit of both things. And I don't know that I fear the Celtics still, but to me – it kind of goes back to what we were saying before. They are relentless in their approach. And I think that's sort of the defining characteristic of this team. And now it's easy to see that in hindsight, where it felt like that was a problem with this team when it wasn't working. But they are so practiced at it now. And that's sort of my greater point now. I'm kind of like zooming even further out. No, this was not a difficult path. In fact, it was one of the easiest paths we've ever seen an NBA champion have to go through.
Sure.
But it wasn't like the Pacers ended up in the finals. It's still the Boston Celtics, who have arguably the best starting 5 in the NBA, had the best record in the league in the NBA. It's not surprising that they're here and hoisting the Larry O'Brien trophy, right? So it's not fluky. We can't call it fluky. It was an easy path this season, and we can critique it. But to me, it's been a hard path for this Celtics team to get to this point over the last several years.
Yes.
Right? Even if this specific path wasn't that hard, it was hard for this team to get to this point, and for that reason, I feel like they are very deserving. And I'm almost happy for them,
I am. I mean, I won't hide from that. I think, like, to me, Boston, watching Tatum's post-game interview with Lisa Salters on ESPN was evidence of what their path was. It wasn't really this season. It was the past 7. You know what I mean? And like, the past couple in particular, with the finals loss and then the collapse against Miami last year and multiple times. And then they finally, it felt like this year it was like really, truly, like, we're kind of bulletproof. What else could we possibly,
right?
What could face us? You know what I mean? And like, yeah, it ended up only being the Pacers minus Halliburton, the Cavs minus Mitchell, and the Heat minus Butler, so we can pick nits in that, but I don't really think those teams were going to beat them, and part of that is also just the East sucks, so even those teams with Halliburton, Mitchell, and Butler aren't that great at the end of the day, but that was their adventure, or their journey here. That was what it was. It wasn't a one-season thing. Were you afraid of Denver? Because I think that also kind of speaks to this moment in the league.
Yes.
You were.
Jokic to me is terrifying. Yeah, that guy is terrifying. So, and that, I guess that's just when you talk about fear.
Because the Nuggets' path wasn't that hard, really. If you think of, they didn't have this David versus Goliath, or I guess no, like Godzilla versus Kong, two juggernauts,
right.
Not David versus Goliath, the opposite. They went through the Lakers, the Suns, and who'd they play in the Western Conference? Oh, they played the Lakers and then the Wolves in the first round.
And then the Wolves without, a bunch of guys that
they lost what
obviously helped them in this series.
4 games their whole postseason run, so they didn't have a hard path either.
And to your point, it's almost a little silly to debate the path. But I get it. I get debating it during, like, when you're trying to make predictions. That stuff matters. Like, I don't care about how great Boston's net rating was in their playoff run, because all the teams they played sucked. Yeah. So miss me with the net rating and their clutch 6-0 in clutch games that were in 5 of them, they end up giving up 20-point leads just to make it a clutch game, so I don't think you should get credit for that. And then, so when you're trying to make a prediction, I understand that. But then after the fact, you throw all that stuff away. And I firmly do believe that. It's two different conversations using the same data set, right?
I think that's fair.
And so I'm at this point where, look, you already said it. Boston was the favorite going into the playoffs to come out of the East. So the fact that they did come out of the East doesn't really matter anymore. Mm-hmm. And now that they beat the Luka Doncic Dallas Mavericks, who were tired and beat up by the time they got to the finals, and if people want to still kind of, pour salt on Boston's NBA Finals series win, I mean, I guess go ahead and do it. You could do the same thing with Denver facing an 8-seed Miami Heat team, but these teams got through tough paths going into these finals, and that's sort of what I think I said this to you maybe last week or whatever, but I think we were overrating the Dallas Mavericks because of how difficult their path was going into this series, and underrating the Boston Celtics, strangely enough, considering how easy their path was going into this series. But at the end of the day, the Celtics are always good enough to win the championship.
I think the Celtics, I think the point you made about them being relentless is the right one. They also just play hard. They do have the signatures of the unflappability. You cannot kind of they make themselves uncomfortable, but you can't really make them uncomfortable. The chemistry, the everything else, it's every ingredient but that number one guy. I guess I think you have a list for us to talk through how we got here with Boston, because that was going to be my way of returning all the way back around to this game and this series is their players are better.
Their players are better.
Their players are just better than the Dallas Mavericks players.
And you were hinting at it earlier too before I get to my list. Like, they hadn't won anything going into this. In fact, they were extremely disappointing in a lot of series going into this finals. But in a way, they've almost trauma bonded over all that stuff.
Feels
and they
like
got
it.
through their boss battles, right? They had to lose to Steph Curry in the finals. They had to lose a couple of times to Jimmy Butler. They got through the boss battles. They just didn't happen this year. But when you build a team with continuity and chemistry, those past failures are still part of the path and the adversity that gets you to this point, right? And just like we talked about Michael Jordan, late 80s, early and in the 90s and stuff, running into that wall over and over and over again. Magic Johnson running into that wall over and over and over again. And then finally, you win a championship. All those past failures become a story of overcoming adversity now. And so that loss in the 22 finals, those losses to the Miami Heat in the playoffs, that now becomes a part of Boston's story of adversity, not of disappointment anymore. And so that's how you shape a narrative.
I mean, Jaylen called it graduating, right? Wasn't that what he got overheard on the mic saying? George Sedano reported it, that he said, this is where we graduated to. And I feel like that's a great word for it. They took their lumps, but that made them kind of ready for this.
So I've got the top 5 moves that resulted in the Celtics championship. We're going to count down from number 5 to number 1. Number 1 being the most important move for the Celtics championship team. Number 5, trading Marcus Smart in a 3-team deal for Kristaps Porzingis and a first-round pick. Number 4, trading Robert Williams, Malcolm Brogdon, 2 first-round picks for Drew Holiday.
Hold on, you gotta. Don't you have a little Mario coin sound? Because that's very Leprechaun.
I do somewhere.
That's the right one for this.
You're right. Let's find it, because I can't remember what button I put it on. So we're gonna play around here. Nope, not that one. Here we go. Boom. All right.
There it is.
Starting over. Number 5, trading Marcus Smart in a 3-team deal for Porzingis and a first-round pick. Number 4, trading Robert Williams, Malcolm Brogdon, and 2 firsts this past summer for Drew Holiday.
That one's
Number
the
3,
steal. That one makes
that's the steal.
Two injured players and picks which they don't care about because they want to win a championship. That's all it costs to get a guy who legitimately was on the table for Finals MVP up until, maybe tonight. He could have won it if he scored 30 tonight, and that's what they gave up.
Number 3, trading 2 first-round picks for Derek White in 2022. I do think that's slightly more important than the Drew Holiday deal. Number 2, trading back from 1 to 3 to draft Tatum in 2017.
Did you see the Sixers fans just tormenting themselves retweeting the Mark Stein news break of that deal on draft night in 2017? Just great stuff.
You know what? Here's a hot take. I still think it was the right move for Philadelphia.
I believed in Markelle Fultz wholeheartedly in that draft, so
I saw
I'm not
him
going to
live,
go
and
rewind and say no.
Nobody could have seen the thing that happened to him that we're still not entirely sure what happened to him. Nobody saw that coming. It was the right move for them.
I saw him in person too. He was a freak in college.
Yes. I compared him to LeBron James, a point guard LeBron James. Number 1, trading Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett to the Nets for first in 2014, 2016, 2018, and a swap in 2017. The 2014 pick became James Young. Not important. The 2016 pick became Jaylen Brown. Very important. The 2018 pick was used in the Kyrie deal, which was still an important moment for this franchise. And the swap in 2017 was the greatest swap in NBA history because it became the number 1 pick in the draft that they traded back to number 3 with Philadelphia to take Jayson Tatum in 2017. So those are your top 5 moves that resulted in the Celtics championship. Did I get anything wrong, Brendon?
No, when I interrupted you to hype up the Holiday trade, it wasn't so much that I thought it was the most important because, of course, you got the list right, I think, order-wise. It's just that one feels like the biggest steal. The other ones I can sort of justify. The Nets thing, maybe less so. But, the Derek White trade at the time, and still, I don't think it's going to play out this way, but they owe like a top 2 protected pick, right? So there's a lot of risk associated with giving that up for somebody who at the end of the day is still like a super role player. And if you don't win a championship with that guy, it looks even worse. Right. But Holiday, it's just nothing. At the end of the day, it was nothing that they gave up, and they improved on Smart, who they had just we knew it was a steal in real time that they were able to orchestrate that without even planning it out that way, and it feels even more like a heist in hindsight.
They should give Joe Cronin a ring, the Blazers general manager, or a ring or whatever, like maybe a pinky ring, a bracelet, not quite like the whole ring, but something commemorative. The Derek White trade, the Drew Holiday trade, what those things mean to me is, and of course, Kristaps Porzingis trade, it was, we found our stars. We identified over a few years of trial and error what it is that we needed to surround them with, the exact kind of players. As much as we love Marcus Smart, he wasn't exactly what we needed at that position. As much as we loved Robert Williams, he wasn't exactly what we needed at that position. Malcolm Brogdon, ditto, all these guys. And they went out and they said, you know what, screw the first-round picks. We don't care about, everybody's wants draft picks for everything all the time. There's a draft pick fetish going around in the NBA and among NBA media analysis. Oh, you got all these picks. You must be a great GM. It's really easy to trade good players for mediocre draft picks.
Yeah.
It's not that hard to do that. But the Celtics did the opposite. They said, we don't need our picks because we got our guys. We're going to go get the guys that we need. And our window is open, but we're going to make it even more open. And we're going to really go for this thing. And I do think that there's an art to going all in. And whether or not teams even win the championship or not, obviously the winning of the championship is the most important thing. But I really respect it when an organization says, screw the draft picks, let's go for it right now.
What I've always marveled at covering a team that is the opposite of nimble, Wes, is how nimble they've been able to be. Obviously, getting picks and Porzingis back for Smart is like, I know we're in the Washington is doing the right thing in their front office mode of how we're kind of talking about that, but I'm not going to let that slide. They really gave Porzingis away, and that helps. That's like the epitome of being able to do both at once. Getting picks, having assets, while also making moves to improve. That one is an exception, but still, they did that over and over. Like, they signed and traded Grant Williams away. If, it's a move that's not going to get talked about, but they got like 2 seconds back in that deal, and they, lose Horford and get him back. And they, even when they did the Kyrie and Hayward experiment, they never went fully all in, and they never had to bottom out. They just kept churning and churning. And of course, you can do that when you have Tatum and Brown, but they did a good job of it.
I think we make the mistake a lot that we think that there's 30 good GMs in the NBA. And it's just not the case. And maybe the overall, we're kind of talking through this, I'm realizing the defining factor in the Boston Celtics build to the 2024 championship team was taking advantage of mistakes from other front offices. The Brooklyn Nets doing what they did for Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce, trading away their entire future that became 2 10-pole stars for the Boston Celtics championship team, was a mistake. It was one of the worst trades in NBA history what the Brooklyn Nets did, and it launched a Boston Celtics championship window. the Wizards not knowing what they had with Kristaps Porzingis. I remember writing a feature on Porzingis last year when he was playing for the Wizards, talking about how even I knew what they had, and I'm not like that's not even a victory lap. And I'm like, I'm not watching every Wizards game, and I did a whole profile on Kristaps about
in
how
hindsight,
his
why not
career
just
has
keep
turned
him
around. Right?
They kept Kuzma.
What, you got Tyus Jones on this, and now he's going to be a free agent? Congrats.
Porzingis isn't so good that he's going to take you to the 50 wins. Like, keep him. If all you're going to get back is Tyus and like a pick or something, they barely got anything.
You're getting rid of the pick.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's easy for a rebuilding team to just trade your good players for draft picks and restock that way, and they didn't even do that.
Yeah. They got the Warriors pick, I believe. They got the Warriors pick because it was a Chris Paul and all that. Yeah, not a good trade for them. Mm-hmm. Not a good trade for them.
And then you obviously take advantage of the whole mess that was happening with Milwaukee, and then you end up getting Drew Holiday out of it when the Bucks made the mistake of not, making it a 3-team deal to make sure Drew Holiday didn't come back to bite them. So they just can't. They on various degrees of mistakes and bad GMing. Yeah. This Celtics team took advantage of it. And it was, by the way, 2 people in charge, 2 shot callers. It was Danny Ainge that started this thing, and it was Brad Stevens who finished it.
Stability, right? They didn't have to worry about their jobs, and I think that goes a long way when you're able to know, like, I love to make fun of Danny Ainge for almost trading for players. It's just a tale as old as time, but it worked out, and I think Brad Stevens kind of put it into hyperspeed a little bit more than his predecessor did here, but that was just what the team called for. But I have 2, maybe we can, if you're ready to transition to Dallas, this could take us there. Otherwise we can stay on Boston, but 2 things about this championship for Boston that made me appreciate LeBron James. This is out of nowhere, but work with me. Follow me here. So the Celtics-related one is that LeBron, outside of the Warriors fluke, is the only player who will have won a championship during the super team era with a super team, and he did it twice. Mm-hmm. I think that's just gone. Like, I think draft, develop, and go crazy with that churn to build 3 through 8 around that is pretty much proven out to be how you're going to win in this moment, and moments change. Maybe this offseason puts us in a different direction, but the 21, 22, 23, and 24 titles were all examples of that now. LeBron just a little blip in 2020 as a complete exception to that, winning with Anthony Davis the first year they're together in a bubble with a whole new supporting cast and no chemistry, none of the things we're talking about applied. And then to take it to the Dallas side.
Well, wait, on the LeBron thing, and I think it's a good point, and I just want to hammer it here. If LeBron does something, it doesn't make it a trend. It means he might be the greatest player of all time. Yeah. Right? And it doesn't necessarily work. And we've seen teams try to recreate what LeBron did with the 2011 to 2014 Heat, with the Cavaliers, and even with that Lakers team. Only LeBron could do that. He was a dynasty unto himself. He was the continuity. He was the consistency. That's the guy that played in the finals 8 years in a row. Yeah. He was that. He was the Rock. It's really difficult, and I think you're right. This idea that other superstars, just because they're superstars, even if they're not superstars to the degree of LeBron James, could recreate what LeBron did in the super team era, whether it's Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, whoever it might be. It's really hard to just cobble together a bunch of players. And so I do think that the Celtics and some of these teams like the Nuggets and everything like that, if they proved anything, it's that the continuity part matters. I don't know that it matters necessarily how you acquire your stars, whether it's the draft, free agency, or trade. Sure. But acquiring those stars and making sure that they play together for a long time and identifying problems and not just being willy-nilly about how you construct a roster and keeping some flexibility so that once you have your tentpole stars, you can go out and surround them with the role players that they need, that are specifically tailored to complement them. And I think that's the lesson we've learned not just from the Celtics, but over the last few years of the teams that have won.
Yeah, Giannis and Middleton. I know they get Holiday as kind of their hired gun, but then the Warriors win it without Durant, so it's kind of back to that original build, and then the Nuggets and now the Celtics. And the other lesson, the LeBron lesson of the 2024 finals, which for some reason I have for us here, that is pretty much the same thing, but more of a on-court lesson that goes to the Mavericks side of this is it is so fucking hard to play the way that LeBron plays and win championships. Right. And Luka has now tried for a very long time to break through this, even with the dude that LeBron once did it with. And we are just learning that every possession running through you, creating great shots for your team, 50, 100 times per game, per round, per series, per postseason is just, I don't want to say it's impossible for anybody else, but it feels that way because the thing walking away, you mentioned it when we were talking about the game, Luka looked hurt or tired or whatever. It shouldn't collapse from there. It shouldn't be there that they just run up against a wall if he's 15% worse, but that's how Luka kind of has to play. That's how the Mavs have to play, and no one really can do that except for LeBron James.
Yeah, I'm glad you made this comparison because I was listening to you and Chris talk on the Friday episode last week, and everybody was sort of talking about the lambasting of Luka Doncic and what this all meant for his legacy, and can he in game 4 he bounced back, played better defensively. And I think it was you mentioned that you thought the criticism was a little too heavy-handed on Luka Doncic, and I really don't. I saw both sides of it. I'm like, yeah, we were probably a little too hard on Luka because they're not here if it's not for Luka. So I think it did go a little bit too far in that direction. But I also get criticizing the top player when that top player, I don't think it's arguable that Luka wasn't doing everything that he could to help his team win, even if he was the only reason why the team was in the mix to win in the first place, right? And that's the difference between Luka and LeBron was there was never quite, even when LeBron was getting annihilated by a flukily constructed Golden State Warriors team that added Kevin Durant to a 73-win team, nobody ever questioned whether LeBron was doing everything he could, even when the task at hand was so daunting and nearly impossible. Nobody ever questioned that LeBron wasn't giving everything he could on every single possession.
Yeah,
and that's
fair.
the difference between LeBron and Luka. And then to me, the real difference is like LeBron really tried hard defensively. His greatest play in his entire finals history might be a defensive play. That's never going to happen for Luka. And so that's what makes it really hard is when you have to do everything you can to give your offense a decent look at the basket the way that LeBron and Luka had to do, but then you add that other layer of being an all-NBA caliber defender on top of all this during a dynasty run or whatever you want to call it that LeBron had.
Yep.
It's just crazy. So I do agree with your overall point that it's really hard to construct a roster that way when you have something close to LeBron, but it's not LeBron. And that's what I go back to it. Just because LeBron did it doesn't mean it works for everybody else, does not make it a trend. It just means LeBron did it.
Yeah, he had a couple, shout out a couple plays in the 2013 finals that I think get lost to time that LeBron should. People always talk about the block. I always, we got to remember the shots over Boris Diaw and whatnot. But,
right.
Yeah, it's a very difficult ask to play this way. And the reason I thought about it is Luka, this is how I came off of last season feeling about him is I don't know if he's risen to the level to justify the way that the roster and the style are built. But it's the same argument we went around and around on with James Harden. Call it heliocentric, whatever. It was kind of funny how we didn't call it that with LeBron, even though it kind of was. And then we came up with like a slur for it once he was not playing quite that way and had a 3-point shot and Anthony Davis on his team and whatnot. But like whatever we call it, whatever name we use, whatever examples we hold up, I don't know if Luka has proven to be good enough to justify it. And if it's not Kyrie and all these role players, like I look at their roster, I think shooting is an obvious thing that I'm going to be trying to get this offseason. Just one more reliable shooter who's not going to combine to go 1 of 9 like PJ Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. did in this closeout game. But other than that, this roster is pretty well suited for him, and this is how far they got.
Yeah, I'm not going to go so far as to say I don't think it'll work. I do think that the similar thing that I like between Luka and LeBron versus other sort of the heliocentric players, whether it's Russell Westbrook, James Harden, whatever, there was an element of stat padding when it came to Harden and Westbrook a little bit, where I do still believe that Luka's making the right basketball play every time he has the ball in his hands. And I didn't always think that with some of those other heliocentric guys. But with LeBron and Luka, they're generating good shots. To me, the way you build around Luka is very similar to the way that Denver builds around Nikola Jokic. Nobody's going to sit here and kid themselves that Jokic is a good defender, right? He's better, even statistically and because of the metrics, because he's a center and gets rebounds and stuff than Luka is. But I do think that Luka probably pound for pound is a better defender than Jokic. I think there's a way you can construct a roster around Luka that makes it work. And we did see him nudge in the right direction, right? He was looking to play faster, get the ball up with the hit-of-head passes. He was a little bit more deferential than Kyrie Irving. I would actually argue maybe sometimes too deferential to Kyrie Irving in big moments. So I'd actually like to see that go back the other way sometimes. But we saw steps in the right direction. And Luka's still so young, man. This might be his Jayson Tatum 2022 finals that he learns from. And then we saw Tatum kind of rejigger his game in a way that made more sense and was more conducive to winning a championship over the last couple of years, and especially this year. So I think it could work, and they made such great strides from a roster-building construction standpoint. They do need to go out and re-sign Derrick Jones Jr. if that's what they end up deciding that they want to do. It's going to be hard for them to make this roster better, and I don't know if that's a conversation for now or for another podcast, but I haven't given up on the idea that you can win a championship.
To be clear, me neither. I don't think that it can't work or won't work. I'm definitely not in the fully anti-heliocentrism camp that I think some people, because it's not aesthetically pleasing, I think that is part of why there's been such a pushback that this can't win. I mean, I think the Rockets very easily could have won a title with Harden, so I don't subscribe to that. I guess what I'm trying to highlight is the maddening and, if I'm a Mavs fan, exhausting part or subtext to how they've done all this is that the way that they will win, if it ever happens, is just him getting better because it's all on him already. There can be incremental improvements around the roster. I mean, we saw how much having 2 rim runners helped them this year, for instance, and there's all of that stuff, but it just feels like it always is going to come back to Luka needs to be better. Luka didn't do enough. Brian Windhorst ripping him to shreds, because that's what this all is. There's no one else to point to when you fail because that's how it's all set up.
Yeah. No, it's fair. I do think that the series looks a little bit different if PJ Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. are hitting their threes and don't go cold, right? And if they could just get somebody to get hot at some point, that's fine. And the Celtics built their championship roster this way. This is the weird way to build a championship roster, is not having that super duper star. Whatever we think of Tatum, he's not that guy. He's still maybe the 5th or 6th best player in the NBA, but he's not Luka, he's not Jokic, he's not Giannis. But the way that the Mavericks are going about it is sort of historically the way it works. So I think it can work. You're right, Luka does need to get better. I think Jayson Tatum, one of the most important things that happened to him was losing specifically to Steph in the 22 finals. Seeing how Steph, when he's not scoring, he still does stuff. He still screens for his teammates. He still tries hard defensively. Even though he's not a good defender, he still works on that end. He's still passing. He's still making plays. He's still an emotional leader. I thought him losing to Steph was very indicative of how he plays now. When, everybody in Boston media will tell you how great of a screener Jayson Tatum has become. I think that's because they lost to the Warriors and Steph Curry. I think he got that straight from Steph. It's just a guess of mine. Because that's when you started seeing that kind of shift happen, was after that. So I think with Luka losing to the Celtics here, is that something that he looks at and says, we need to play a little bit more like that? We're never going to play like them. That doesn't make sense for us. But can we play a little bit more? Can we just dial that? Can we turn that dial 10% that direction? And does that create an effect on us where I have to do a little bit less, I can empower my teammates a little bit more, and then we can all sort of rise with that tide? I don't know. It's a tough thing that Jason Kidd and Luka Doncic have to work out, but they did work that out after last year, after they failed with Kyrie Irving, and they both said, we got to play faster, and they both agreed, and they played faster, and you saw how that worked.
They don't play the same way, but to your point, the reason we all were wondering about Tatum this whole time is because he kind of ended up being the guy in the big spots, which I think is almost proof that even if you play like him, you'll still bear the majority of the responsibility. And you look at their box score production and volume on all this stuff, almost identical field goal attempts in this game, assists, rebound. there's a million ways to skin a cat or whatever metaphor you want to use, but I think Luka can get off it earlier in possessions and spread the wealth, and potentially that could be the lesson he learns. Or hey, maybe he just is an even more ferocious, the pull-up three keeps getting more consistent and he posts up more and he just is a killer version of what he already is and wins a title that way. I think that could easily happen. But yeah, I mean, do you have thoughts on Dallas, how they can kind of spin this? Because Derek Jones is a free agent and they have a lot of guys that they're going to have to evaluate of, is this a player that's going to be in our rotation long term?
Yeah, I do have one take that is sort of related to this, and it's something that I've been thinking about. Everybody agreed that the Celtics were under the most pressure going into the finals because of everything that they've done to go all in on this season and everything that was on the line, and given how easy their path was to the finals, there was just that much more pressure to actually win the thing. And the more I've thought about it, I actually think there was more pressure, and it's really easy to say this now that Dallas lost the series, and I'm recognizing that. I'm acknowledging it. But maybe the Mavericks were under more pressure than the Celtics. And I think that's because the East will be better next year, hopefully, if people are healthy. Just by virtue of a tougher playoff schedule, because the teams you're playing are healthier, the East will be tougher.
Yeah.
The West is so stacked. And even those really good teams are only getting better, it feels like right now. And you never know if there's going to be a last gasp from a team like the Lakers or the Warriors or something like that. But there is no guarantee that Luka ever makes it back to the finals as long as he's playing for the Mavericks, considering how hard the West is and how teams like the Thunder and the Timberwolves and all these and the Nuggets even, these teams aren't going away, man. And Memphis will be back next year and they'll have something to say. These teams are not going away. This might have been, there is a galaxy where this was the last and only chance for Luka Doncic to ever win a championship in Dallas.
Just ask
and that's
Giannis,
a lot of pressure
right?
that's on that. Right. Just look at Giannis. Exactly. You never know. And so I do think that the Mavericks, now getting back to your question, are under quite a bit of pressure this offseason. Now, I know they traded a lot in the P.J. Washington deal and all these things, and they're limited in terms of resources. And the good thing for them, though, is that their only real free agent of consequence is Derek Jones Jr. And if you can manage to bring him back, which I would just pay him whatever you need to pay him to bring him back because he was that important to this team, bring him back. And then after that, you bank, I think, on internal growth from Derek Lively, another full year of P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford being in your system, a full training camp. They're only going to be better going into next season, and they're young enough where they can still have some room to grow. And then it's doubling down, I think, on Luka and Kyrie and figuring out a way to get that partnership to sing a little bit more. There was moments of clarity during the season where that two-man game was great, but one of the takeaways I had from these finals, their two-man game was gone in this final series. They were barely screening for each other. They were barely playing off of each other. The one pass away stuff was barely a factor. Yeah. And definitely credit to Boston and their length and their defensive scheme and everything for doing some of that. But I still think that there was some low-hanging fruit that was just left there for the Mavericks. It does come down to internal growth and then being opportunistic. I think you hit it too. Finding more shooting, finding more depth. Can you turn the Tim Hardaway thing into something that's helpful for you? Can you move some of these deck chairs around? Can you turn Dante Exum into something? Can you turn that might be a little bit more helpful to your rotation? Can you turn Kleber into something that might be more helpful to your rotation? Those are little things that they can do, but to me is the starting five, yeah.
They do have some pick flexibility to trade still. I mean, we think of them as being so hamstrung because they keep making these deals, but they have some firsts, some seconds. They're not going to be able to make a huge trade, but you combine some of that with Hardaway, who you mentioned, Josh Green, Maxi Kleber, all on big enough contracts that you could trade them. Even Dwight Powell has a player option 2 seasons from now, which is an insane thing to say. So yeah, look, they can get better, and I think they will. And I think they've been really aggressive about that churn we talked about with Boston. To be honest, I mean, they were the team that got Grant Williams, and then he's not even on the team anymore. As just one example of that. So.
Dallas did a good job with the minimum signings last year. Derek Jones Jr., Dante Exum, these guys were all brought in on minimums, played huge roles for the team. If Nico Harrison in this group can identify one or two more of those minimum guys who just click with this group, then that's great, because you just need more of those guys. They got a bunch of them. Now they need more of them.
They need one winger forward. Maybe that's the Prosper guy they drafted. and they need one more shooter, And they had Seth Curry. They've had ideas like this, and I think it's just about, can you land on that one roster that has all of it? And they haven't quite been able to do that. They fall against the Warriors. Now they're falling against this team. Kind of similar. Those long athletic groups seem to be able to kind of take away their offensive flow in a way that's damaging. But yeah, I was going to ask you if you thought Boston had a better shot at repeating than any of these teams over the years now that we've had a new champion, a new finals matchup every single season. Can Boston buck that trend? You said Dallas has the whole starting lineup. So does Boston. I mean, everybody's coming back here.
I think they probably do. I thought the Nuggets had a really good chance. I'm not going to just say, I thought they had a really good chance to go ahead and repeat this year, and I still think that they would have been
up until Naz Reid did whatever he did in the fourth quarter. I still thought that. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, but maybe just by virtue of the East being weaker than the West, maybe you do have to give it to Boston. But we also have to see how this offseason plays out. What does Philadelphia look like after their offseason? Milwaukee, I think, is going to be better next year. So I'll probably, and then Boston they did get some good breaks, not just in terms of their opponent health, but their own health in general. I know every Celtics fan wants to talk about how Kristaps Porzingis was out. That's more of, it would have been weirder if he wasn't hurt, for as long as he was. So
since the Hayward thing, they've always been healthy. It's weird. Yeah. That's the thing that doesn't get, I think, hit on with them of why they're always here, is they never have had a major injury between Tatum and Brown, at least, especially.
So I would say probably tied with the Nuggets. I'll go there, but maybe a slight edge to the Celtics, again, only because of how the East projects to be next year.
Yeah, I'm not
if
even.
If you're another East team, what do you do? Is, I guess, my question, because now the East goes through the Boston Celtics pretty firmly. Not only they're not only the Eastern Conference Finals champions, they're the Finals champions. So everything you do has to sort of be geared towards, we got to beat this team that is right on the cusp of what could be a dynasty. Like, that's what we don't have to have. Like, can they become a dynasty? But they can be. They just won the championship. They're young, and they've got everything under control. So if you're the Sixers, it's pretty obvious what you want to do. They've been telling everybody on planet Earth what it is that they plan on trying to do here. But if you're not a Philly or a Milwaukee that kind of has the stuff that you need to go win a championship already, or most of it, the stars, and you have an idea of what it is that you have to do. What do you do? I guess maybe you could put the Knicks in that conversation too. Like, is this a situation where you just say, maybe it's time to fall back here and maybe wait this out?
No,
is it too early for that?
I think, well, one, it's like part of what holds me back from feeling like Boston is on a runaway train here is they're already expensive. And Tatum even said it in the post-game interview. He's like, Al doesn't have a lot of years left doing this. I'm like, why don't you let the man decide that for himself? You're just retiring him on national TV after 1 year. But he's right? So it's like,
I think he said he doesn't have much time left. And I was like, are you killing him?
Yeah, is he good? Is there something we need to hear about here? But no, but Porzingis, Holiday, White. Well, White needs an extension this summer. Tatum could get one too. Brown already got the huge one. So they kind of would need to win next year and three-peat. They got to win all of them right away. They're not going to have a lot of years because they lost 22 and everything else. So definitely not falling back. But as far as how to go about trying to match up with them, I mean, I think it's funny because to me, it's nothing like what Golden State was built like. That feels like an aberration. I mean, Boston was playing two bigs back then, and Smart was involved, but this version of the Celtics, I don't want to have Draymond Green as my center. I want to have as much size and be even bigger than them, while also having, I think, some player or system, but player who can consistently create shots that can, over the course of a series, combat their math and everything else. So luckily, multiple teams in the East already have that between Giannis and Embiid and whatever else we could see jump over there. But that would be where I go. Somebody who can just overpower them and create good offense. I mean, I think that's why the Nuggets were pretty successful even this regular season against them, and why we all thought if that was the finals, Denver would have the upper hand.
I think you're right, and I would have been really interested to see what Minnesota looked like in a matchup against Boston too, because that would have been some of those elements that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And for Philadelphia and for Milwaukee, they have that size factor, right? They've got Joel Embiid, and they've got Giannis, and Giannis is sort of a one-man wrecking crew and does everything he does and gets all the spray out threes and all those things. Like he puts pressure on the rim in a way that even Luka doesn't put pressure on the rim. And then with Embiid, a lot of what I thought Philadelphia was trying to accomplish this year was a mirror image of what the Denver Nuggets were doing with Jokic. They were empowering Embiid to be more of a passer in the high post. They were trying to get that two-man game between him and Tyrese Maxey. They were surrounding him with long wings and help on defense, not just relying on him to just be a big 7-footer in the middle of the paint, blocking shots at the basket. So I think those teams are probably on the right path. I also thought that the Pacers had a lot of success against the Celtics by playing fast and not letting them get into their half-court defense. I think that that's probably a strategy too, and obviously matching them in terms of three-point frequency. So I think there's probably multiple ways. And I'll go back to what I said. Boston, very deserving champion. I agree with you. Not time to fall back. Not a team that strikes fear in me necessarily, but still a lot of respect for that team and what they've accomplished.
Yeah, very, very cool to see the culmination. I mean, I always love. It's weird. Denver got me last year. Like after they won it, I was like, that's cool. Like I was really like emotionally hit. I felt like that should happen this year because we have even more history with Boston than we do with Denver. Mm-hmm. But either way, you don't need to rank them. It was cool. But for some reason, I was like, maybe it just felt inevitable. I was like, yeah, the Celtics got theirs. Great. Whereas with Denver, it was the injuries and can Jokic do it and all them being it's their first in franchise history. Whereas for Boston, we're almost to 20. But it's cool. It's cool when you have that history, no matter how long it is.
It has been a lot of champions where the big takeaway is the guy who we weren't sure could do it did it, right? We've had a lot of those now with Tatum and Jokic and Giannis. It is. And I guess that's what happens when you don't have repeat champions anymore. Yeah. I do think that it's going to be really important for Boston to repeat next year to judge this championship. Mm-hmm. And I think it was important for Milwaukee to do
Moving
it.
Moving the goalposts already.
Also, but we got
do it again.
We got to. Do
it in the finals
next year.
Do it in the fourth quarter. Do it again. Yeah.
Yep. Do it again. They enter on BetMGM as the favorite to win the championship next year. Yes.
I think they have to. They have the fewest questions too. I mean, yeah, I just said Horford and Tatum's killing him and all that, but like. They got 5 guys. Denver doesn't.
They can run it back for a year.
Denver has a free agent. Milwaukee doesn't even have a rotation. Right. The Knicks have questions. The West, I mean, everybody in the West basically has something. Philly needs to actually build the team we're all imagining they could have. The Celtics they just did it, and they're bringing it all back. I mean, I think it is a 1-to-1 with Denver last year. They are exactly in the same position the Nuggets were in, and we thought the Nuggets were at least co-favorites or close to it. I think most fans agree all season. So that should be the season the Celtics have next year, I think, for sure.